Welcome to Season 2 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sarah F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sarah F. Hathaway.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Changing Earth podcast. I'm really excited for this season. The cast is lining up to be a spectacular cast of people that are coming on the show to give you some knowledge about survival information that you can pack away in your toolbox for a doomsday event. But I've also got a lot of information for you this year that's about getting that right attitude, getting that right survival attitude, getting in sync with your significant other so that you guys are ready to face anything that gets thrown at you. And so some really interesting topics this season. I can't wait to get started, and we're going to do that today. And today I'm going to introduce you to my brand new book. It's called Without Land. And, I got to tell you, Day After Disaster took me about, 9 years to write. It was kind of my hobby project. And Without Land, I knew exactly where I was going. And so it was a lot of fun to write. I got it done really quick. I'm working on book 3 now, so it's exciting to see the story just continue to grow. But I think I made leaps and bounds in the book Without Land. And I got to tell you, it's one of my favorite books to read. I absolutely delight in doing the recordings of this book. So I'm excited to get started there. Today we're just going to kind of get reintroduced back to our characters and get into the beginning. So I also have Raymond Dean White. He's back on the show today, and he is going to talk to us about growing sprouts, how we can do that, and why you would want to grow sprouts. Why would this skill be so important? So really important skill, and I'm happy to have him back on the show this season. So I'll go ahead and introduce you to him after we get started with Without Land. Without Land by Sarah F. Hathaway. Dedication. For Brock Hathaway, you are my everything. Our love lives within the eyes of our beautiful boys and is shared with readers in the pages of these books. Chapter 1. Erica's warm tears mingled delicately with the cool water in the basin. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her soft chestnut-colored eyes were puffy from crying. Slowly, she brushed her long brown hair behind her ear. She had noticed some new strands of gray, but that was not what she was looking at. Her fingers slowly traced the lines of the scars her body bore from her escape from Sacramento. It seemed a lifetime ago, but the rough, mangled skin she saw reflected back at her in the mirror reminded her that it had not been some horrible nightmare conjured up in her dreams. Erica was doing it again, dredging up the memories from the past that haunted her. She splashed the cold water over her face as the images of the ones she had left behind flashed in her mind. Oh God, how could they have done it? She squeaked out in a muffled whimper. Suddenly there was a soft tap at the door. Baby, you ready yet? Vince's deep, manly voice questioned. The sound of his voice snapped Erica back into reality. Oh yeah, be out in a minute, she quickly answered, barely controlling the quiver in her voice. Water smashed over her face again, and she grabbed a towel that was on the counter. It wasn't a soft, cushy towel like the one she had known when she was younger. It was simply a piece of cloth, probably from an old t-shirt salvaged from some destroyed town. The water swirled down the drain when she yanked on the chain that held the stopper in place. She made a mental note to change the bucket under the basin that held the dirty water later, as she stared at the vortex. Shaking all those painful thoughts from her head, she went toward the door. Erica turned the knob and the door creaked open. Vince's loving eyes met hers. They were beautiful. Gold stars extended from his pupils and smoothly melded into the hazel color that surrounded them. His face was neatly shaven, and his handsome features struck Erica silent as she looked at him. "What's wrong, Erica?" Vince could immediately tell she had been crying. "Nothing. I'm just shocked to see you looking all GQ with your beard shaved," she teased, trying to distract him. He blushed a little. "It's itchy. Now really, what's up?" he prodded on. "Nothing, really, I'm fine." Erica was hesitant to tell him about her memories because it was an argument they had too frequently. "Oh no, not again," Vince rolled his eyes. "We are not doing this today." Vince had lived the same nightmare as his wife, but that was then. 9 years had passed, and this was life now. He had lost too much to dwell there, wallowing in memories he was powerless to change. He tried every day, with little success, to forget. "I'm not doing anything, Vince." Erica didn't really want to think about the past today either, but it seemed like she had little control over the anger, sadness, and frustration she felt when she thought of the friends she had left behind in California and the life they had been forced to live since. "That's right, you're not. This could be our chance to get out of this hellhole, and you're not going to blow it again with all your freedom rhetoric," Vince said. It was not his usual way to talk to his wife like that, but he had a good feeling about this meeting. He felt it was just the opportunity they needed, an opportunity to get his family out of this situation and back to a free, real life, a chance to reclaim some of his past and maybe find some of his family he had lost connection with. "That's not fair, Vince. You feel the same way I do." Erica was shocked by his freedom rhetoric comment. Vince's eyes softened. "Baby, you know I do, but I need to get out of here. I hate the desert," he added with a smile. "I know. I need to get out of here too," Erica agreed. "I just can't believe we have come to this." She moved around the wooden room with her arms out as if she was indicating everything, and it wasn't much. A full-size mattress was in the corner. A blanket covered it, 2 pillows made of old T-shirts with more T-shirts stuffed inside for padding decorated it, and an old unzipped sleeping bag was thrown over the top. In the other corner stood a milk crate stacked on a pallet with a kerosene lantern on top. Next to it were 2 backpacks fully packed with everything in the world Erica and Vince cherished. She turned back to face him. "I can't give up on what I know is right. Someone has got to do something for these people. Just please, let's not let that someone be you doing something today, okay?" Vince pleaded. Okay, she replied sharply. "I will keep my mouth shut and play nice for you today." Feeling guilty, she snapped at him. Erica approached him, wrapped her arms around his muscular body, and stared up into his eyes. "Promise?" he questioned, looking down softly at her. His curly hair was bouncing above his eyes. "I promise," she said with a soft kiss. They opened the door to their tiny bedroom and entered the main room of their dwelling. This room was bigger than their bedroom, but not much. Immediately to the left, there was a recessed area in the wall that contained 3 beds for their children, Star, Dexter, and Daniel. Next to the bed, each child had a backpack stuffed to the brim with their possessions. Directly across from their bedroom door was the door to the outside. The corner to the right of that was reserved for cooking. Erica couldn't consider it a kitchen, compared to the standards she had enjoyed back before the Great Quake. Vince had built counters out of old pallets, and in the top of one a hole was made so the basin they used could set down into it, but still could be easily removed. In the other corner to the right, there was a sitting area, an old salvaged wooden table with 5 chairs surrounding it. Daniel was occupying one of the chairs. "Good morning, Mom and Dad," he said, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Look at what I did this morning," he said with a bright smile, displaying his latest piece of artwork. His feathery blonde hair bounced in the sunlight that entered through a little square that was cut in the wall in the kitchen area. He was a strong, well-proportioned 8-year-old boy. Yesterday, he had delighted in the 3 different colored paints that an old lady down the street had found and given him. Even though paper was very hard to come by, he painted on every inch of every scrap he could find, preciously conserving every drop of the rare paint. "Where's Star and Dex, Daniel?" Vince questioned the boy. "They said they'd meet us at the bus," he answered. His eyes never even looked up from the final touches he was applying to the artwork. The wooden floor creaked as Erica headed over to the kitchen area and grabbed a jar that was full of sprouts she had been growing. She had put the seeds in the jar, then watered and drained them for days. Finally, they were growing. They would grow without the little bit of sunlight from the window, but Erica liked them green, and they would not turn without the precious light. She began munching on a handful. "You want some, baby?" she asked, holding out a handful to Vince. "No, thanks. Come on, guys, we gotta go. Let's get cleaned up, Danny," he said, irritated with the delay. His wife was stalling, and he was determined they were not going to miss the bus. "Oh, Dad," Daniel moaned. "Don't oh, Dad me, mister. Let's go," Vince replied, giving the boy a big hug and a swat on the bottom. Daniel carefully closed up his paints. Then he used a small shot glass of clean water to methodically clean the fine bristles of the brush. Erica had already grabbed the boy's shoes and jacket by the time he had finished. In a few short minutes, they were all ready to go. Okay, so, Erica and her family are living a much different lifestyle than what we enjoy right now. And I know there was quite a jump in time between the end of Day After Disaster and the beginning of Without Land, but you'll just have to stay tuned into the story and see what happened in the time gap. I wanted to do a little bit of a time gap just because I felt that I could recap what had been going on in the story in a little bit better way than trying to extend the book out through those periods. So maybe in the future I'll do like the missing story of the missing 9 years. I could write a book that's the missing 9 years or something like that. But for now, I just really wanted to kind of give it a little bit of a fast forward because, like I say, I know right where I'm going with this story. So it's a lot of fun to watch it unfold. So I just wanted to give it a little bit of a fast forward there. So anyway, today I have Raymond Dean White back with us, and he's going to talk to us about growing sprouts. Now, Raymond Dean White was born in a small town in Kansas and lived an adventurous life, hunting, fishing, trapping, and tracking, backpacking, spelunking, and mountaineering until he got older, wiser, and married. A lifelong avid reader, he writes what he loves to read. Fast-paced action-adventure stories complete with intriguing characters, a touch of humor, and a bit of information thrown in on how to prepare for emergencies. As a hyperactive 10-year-old who still loved to read, he stumbled onto Andre Norton's Starman's Son, and his lifelong love affair with apocalyptic fiction was born. Now retired, he writes terrorist thrillers and apocalyptic action-adventure novels, including The Dying Time Impact and After the Dying Time. He has also written one nonfiction book titled How I Got Published, Famous Authors Tell How in Their Own Words, which details theirs and his adventures in traditional publishing. That book, co-authored with Dwayne Lindsay, is currently available on Amazon.com. So I want to go ahead and welcome Ray back to the show. Thank you, Ray, for being with me today.
It's my pleasure, Sarah.
So today we're talking about the very first chapter of Season 2 of the Changing Earth podcast. So we're getting into Without Land, and in this chapter, Erica is just kind of leading us around her home that she's living in now and explaining how the conditions are 9 years after the Great Quake. So she goes to the kitchen, she's munching on some sprouts. So sprouts are a pretty important thing for us to understand, and that's why I wanted to make a show out of them. I don't think enough people put enough stock in their importance.
Well, I've been sprouting for pretty close on to 30 years now. It's one of the best survival foods you can grow for several reasons. The first thing is they're quick and easy. I mean, it doesn't take anything to grow sprouts, and they can be ready in as little as 3 to 5 days. They're also really tasty. I mean, I love them.
Mm-hmm.
They're nutritious, and you don't need grow lights or really any light at all,
right,
to grow them. You have some sprouts like alfalfa, broccoli, clover, radish. Like I said, they can be ready to eat in as little as 3 to 5 days. Bean, pea, and other of the larger seeded type sprouts take a few days longer, but very nutritious, very easy to grow. I wonder if your readers or if your listeners actually know how easy it is to grow those things.
I don't think they do. We're going to talk about that in a minute because it is so simple, and it's really something you can do while you're on the go in your go bag. The seeds themselves, we have to be able to save them. So what's just some of the easier ways? I know that every plant's different, but how can we just harvest some seeds first of all?
Well, I'll admit that the bulk of my sprouting, I use simple seeds like alfalfa or broccoli, mm-hmm. clover, radish seeds, things like that. They're little tiny seeds, and they're pretty easy to grow yourself. My broccoli plants that I grow almost every year in my garden, I'll have 2 or 3 of those plants that I will let go to seed, and I'll tell you, each one of those plants will create about a bazillion seeds to harvest. You can spend a week just harvesting those things. And then when you
literally when you collect them, so you shake you let the flower go because the seeds are in the flower. That's our reproductive
item. Well, they have to form a pod. They
right.
form a pod actually. Okay, and you have to let the pod dry out.
Okay.
You don't collect the pod when it's green. You let the pod get all dried out, and then it's really pretty easy. You just pop open the pod, and they'll go everywhere if you're not careful. So you have to. Like I try to do it over a white sheet or something like that.
Right, that's what I was getting at. Because those seeds are so small and they're black, so like can we do it over a screen or a white sheet? That works really good. Okay.
Yep, exactly. You have to do, that's the easy, but it's actually easy to save those types of seeds.
Okay.
Other seeds are a lot harder to see. I mean, some of our plants that we grow in our gardens that we might want to save seeds, and I may be getting a little bit off this just the sprouts topic here, but a lot of plants are biennial, which means you can put them in your garden, carrots, for example, turnips, okay? You can put them in your fall garden and just harvest and keep, doing succession plantings and keeping good steady crop of good fresh veggies coming in pretty much through the winter here where I live and all the way on into spring. But if you leave some of those plants in instead of harvesting them, then as they go through the winter cycle, the next year they will produce seeds for you, as opposed to like tomatoes, for example, where you plant them in your garden, they grow, and you collect the seed right then at the end of the tomato bearing season.
Yeah, I just let some of the grown-up tomatoes, I just let them fall in, and then usually I have all kinds of volunteers the next year that I don't even have to worry about.
Which is great if you're using heirloom tomatoes or open-pollinated tomatoes, but if you're trying, if you use hybrids like so many people do anymore, you're not going to have a good result doing that.
Yeah, I always gravitate towards the heirlooms just because I had a teacher who was Native American, and he had a big influence on me, and he talked a lot about, our heirloom seeds and how important it is to keep those strains going for long-term use of the human race, basically.
Well, and that is basically the only drawback I can think of to sprouting, getting kind of back towards that topic, is that you need a constant source of seeds, which means you need to be able to grow your own alfalfa, your own broccoli, your own clover. And if you're sprouting wheat, you or somebody near you needs to be able to grow wheat.
Right.
It's not, that's why I focus on the garden type crops like alfalfa. You can have a little patch of alfalfa. It's like broccoli in that it produces a bazillion seed heads from a very small area.
Right. And the more that I've been getting into researching permaculture and stuff, like having crops like that at certain areas of your garden and things is actually really good for the soil and actually helps to give nutrients to the soil as well.
Yeah, it's a nitrogen fixer. I mean, you can actually rotate these crops like cover crops. You can use alfalfa or clover as a cover crop.
Right.
You know, and that way you're not exactly resting your beds, you know, through the winter and through the next season and stuff like that. If you're like me, you have several different raised beds that you rotate.
Right.
But it's like growing corn in a raised bed one year, or at least for part of a year, and then you plant it with beans or peas.
Right. Yeah, to help amend the soil. It's really interesting stuff.
To fix the nitrogen back into the soil.
Yeah, because usually we just bring in more dirt and or more soil, you know, good soil that's been you know, amended and things, and then we add manure in. But the more that I find out about rotating these crops and growing different things for the nitrogen, it's very interesting material, the permaculture. I'm really interested in digging a little deeper in there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject. There's in my neck of the woods, since our soil is basically rock or caliche, all of the soil that I put into my garden originally came 50-50 anyhow from the native dust that we call dirt that lays on top of the rock. Okay, and it has no organic material in it at all.
Right.
Or compost that I generate myself, you know, or my family generates, you know, and I've got a couple of compost pits out there. Last fall, I grabbed 10 humongous bags of straw and chicken manure from a lady up north of town here that has a chicken farm, or chicken ranch, basically, and I've been composting that straw and chicken manure, you know, because if you have a raised bed, you'll notice after about 2 years, hey, wait a minute, my soil was up at the top of the bed 2 years ago, and now it's like halfway down.
Right.
You know,
right.
And so you got to go through there, and you've got to throw more stuff back into it.
We have a lot of clay out here, so we kind of hit the same problem. We've been just hitting. We have a big, like 50 by 50 area, one of our gardens. You know, we have a couple of the 50 by 50 areas, and then our raised beds as well. But one of them, we've been keeping that one going for years now, like 12 years. And so every year we're just amending the soil and trying to bring it back to some kind of a good pH for the plants and things like that. And so it was very interesting for me to start learning more about the permaculture because, then we wouldn't have to pull in as much soil as we do. We have our chickens, and we do get like horse manure and things like that, let it compost and roll that in as well.
Exactly.
But being able to naturally take care of it would seem like less expensive way to do it, for one thing.
Well, it's all part of being sustainable, which if you're going to eat sprouts or any other vegetable long term, you need to have you have to be capable of building, designing, and maintaining a sustainable garden, which means you need compost, you need manure, you need things like that.
Right.
Okay, or your soil will get exhausted and you'll be in trouble in a few years. But on the we were talking about seeds and the importance of seeds, and we got off onto the topic of heirloom seeds, which are absolutely critical. If you're going to do sprouts, the vegetables that you want to sprout need to be heirlooms.
Yes,
okay?
I agree. I agree.
And that doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference whether you're talking about adzuki beans or, red Russian kale, watercress, anything. If you're going to sprout the stuff, it needs to be an heirloom seed. Speaking of which, maybe we should talk a little bit about the types of seeds that are used for sprouting.
Okay.
Because it's an amazing variety. I mean, bean sprouts, for example, include adzuki beans, garbanzo beans, lentils, mung beans, peas, peanuts, pinto beans, soybeans, You've got brassicas, which are like broccoli, cabbage, kale, mustard, and radish. You've got what people usually call leafy sprouts, which is like alfalfa, watercress, clover.
Oh, your lettuces can be really quick sprouters.
Yep. You have exotics like carrots, some spices like dill, fennel, fenugreek, garlic.
Mm-hmm.
You have garlic, leek, onion, sweet pea. You have grains.
So you'd eat the garlic sprouts like right off the bulb?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. No,
Interesting.
the garlic sprouts, garlic forms seeds.
Right.
And so do onions.
Oh, okay.
You sprout them like you sprout any other seed.
I always sprout it from the bulb.
And then, but that's not the kind of thing that I would take and just eat those. Those are the kinds of things that I'm going to mix in with like alfalfa or broccoli, stuff like this, and you make like your own mixes.
Okay. And that spices it up a little bit, gives you that different flavor?
Well, yeah, it adds a little extra spice.
Okay.
You have, for example, the same with radish, okay?
Right.
Radish sprouts can be a little bit hot. And so, I mix a little bit of radish, a little bit of garlic in with a bunch more alfalfa, broccoli, clover type sprouts, and that's my sandwich mix.
Yes. Very cool.
People, you kind of end up experimenting with this stuff as you get into it. But the main thing is it's just so easy to do. Anybody who does homesteading or prepping, they'll understand that gardening's a process, and the best time to become a gardener is 30 years ago.
Right.
That's the best time to start learning it. Because every year nature's going to throw you a curveball, and you're going to learn something new.
Yes.
You're going to have crop failures, even plants that grew beautifully for you for the last 5 years.
Yep.
The next year, all of a sudden, hello. What's this?
And even when you have all the experience under your belt and you've been doing awesome for so long and you stick to those methods because they've never let you down, then you have the gopher invasion, or you have...
Oh, my God, yes.
You just have things that can happen. This last year, in our soil, we got this ground cover with it. And this stuff grew like 4 inches of our topsoil. And it grew this webbing across our whole garden. The onions couldn't expand through it. It was just a nightmare. I had to dig off the whole top of the garden to get rid of it after I pulled everything. I was so frustrated. So,
for the first 3 years that I was doing raised bed gardening here in Northwest Arizona, I had no problems whatsoever with pests other than a few ground squirrels. And some birds, like we have gamble quail here, and the gamble quail are fairly large birds, and they are like chickens. If they get into your garden while it's sprouting, your garden's gone. So, bird netting, a little bit of chicken wire around the garden, and I thought I was set.
Yeah.
And then the third year, the gophers hit us. The pocket gophers came in. And they tunneled right in and right up into my raised bed, and they just wrecked all kinds of stuff.
They'll eat everything.
I had to go to the fun of taking all my soil out of my raised bed gardens. I critter-proofed them with multiple layers offset of 1-inch chicken wire.
Right.
And once I did that, you put the soil back in and the amendments and things like that you're throwing back in. Then I surround it with chicken wire again to keep things like rabbits or ground squirrels out, or pack rats. And then you top it. I have hoop houses, little small hoop houses over each garden, and it gets bird netting thrown over it to keep the birds and stuff out.
Right.
And so it's like protected 360 degrees.
It's like a jail cell for your plants. Yeah. See, we did the bottom.
It's a bit of a pain when you're trying to harvest, okay? Because you got layers of stuff to get out of your way. But it's the only way.
We did the bottom and didn't do the sides, and the gophers climbed up the plant into the raised bed, like actually climbed up the cucumber to get in there. I was like, you little sons of guns.
Yeah. This year, as a matter of fact, because my raised bed space is limited. This year, I'm putting some 4x4 mesh down the middle of my raised beds and propping it up and using a 4x4 wire mesh as a trellis. And I'm going to go vertical with my cucumbers.
Yeah, we had to do that last year as well.
Plants, and I'm going to try it with the melons. Though I've heard you have to support the melons because they'll get heavy enough they'll just tear off.
Pantyhose. You can put a pair of pantyhose around it and then hook that up to a stake.
And where do you use pantyhose?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask your wife about that one.
See, there you go. Because she hasn't worn those things for a long time.
Yeah, right. I don't know who does anymore. I don't know. I guess I'm not high class enough for that.
Everybody says that. Everybody says pantyhose. Everybody says pantyhose, and I'm thinking, sure.
They're pretty cheap at the store. They're pretty cheap. I store my onions that way through the winter, so.
Yeah. But anyhow.
So the main reason I wanted to talk seeds was because of their valuableness as far as having a good food source, like in a bug out situation. So if you're in a bug out situation, where are some areas that we're going to procure seeds? Creative areas. Not everybody might not know where to find seeds because they're not gardeners or anything like that.
Well, if you're in a bug out situation, it's much more difficult because you're going to go to your local nursery. I mean, and if things have deteriorated badly enough to where you're going to have to bug out, your local nursery may be have armed guards.
True.
But
everybody might hit the grocery store a lot quicker than they're going to hit that nursery.
You might have to swap for seeds, though.
Right.
Right now, if I want seeds, I go to like sproutpeople.com or burpee.com or parkseed.com if I want to order them over the internet. I go to my local nursery because they have seeds. We have local seed swap events here in the Kingman area.
Oh, that's cool.
You can get it from, matter of fact, I'm going to one of those on Saturday. Your local health food store has seeds.
Oh, true.
And then, we were talking earlier, your own garden. Now, you can't take your own garden with you.
Yep.
When you bug out.
But you might be able to find.
You better be taking seeds with you if you have to do that.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to start a garden somewhere. And in the meantime, you can get nutrition by sprouting seeds. Like you said, all it takes, as you know, if you have a canning jar and some cheesecloth and a supply of water, that's all it takes to sprout things.
Right.
And you can throw that in your pack and, keep it fairly comfy warm. I mean, temperature should be around 70 degrees for doing sprouts,
right?
Or a little bit more.
Let's walk through the steps of that. Let's walk through the steps, the various steps of it, because I'm not sure that people understand just how easy this process is. That people often are like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know how to get started." So let's walk through the process of the jar sprouting method, because that's what you would be using in a bug out.
And you can even buy sprouters. But let's just start with the simplest thing. Almost everybody has a jar available of some sort. I don't care if it's a jar that you scraped peanut butter out of not too long ago and washed it out or something like that.
Right.
You have a jar and you got a lid. You can even use a regular solid lid. You just have to poke some holes in it so that your sprouts can breathe. But the best thing I find is to get some cheesecloth, a jar, and a canning ring. Just like you were canning vegetables or something like that. Just a screw-on ring, a metal ring. Well, depending on what size seeds you're sprouting and what size jars you have available, you're going to place anywhere from a half a teaspoon to a quarter cup of seeds in the jar. You usually want to rinse the seeds off first, get them all thoroughly wetted before you even put them in the jar, but, don't have to. You cover them with water, and you let them sit overnight. You set the jar someplace out of direct light, but you place it someplace that they can stay at household temperature. Mine usually sit on the kitchen countertop covered by a lightweight dishcloth.
Okay.
Just in case any rays come in from the kitchen window. I don't want the sunlight hitting my sprouting jars
Right.
until I'm ready for that to happen. But in the morning, after they've soaked overnight, you just drain the water off of them, rinse them out, put the cover back on it and the ring back on it, put water over them again. You do that, you repeat that. Now, here's where people vary. I rinse mine morning and evening. Some people only rinse them once a day, like in the evening.
Uh-huh.
I find that if I rinse them in the morning and in the evening, I get a greater percentage of the seeds sprouting. So I think it improves viability.
Okay.
And they sprout faster.
Okay.
Okay. Not by much, but some. And so, but that's all you have to do. Put the seeds in a jar, cover them with water, drain them, rinse them, keep them out of the direct sunlight. You don't want to stick them in a closed closet or something like that. You want them someplace where they can get some fresh air, because the sprouts need to breathe. But if you do this within 3 days, you'll be seeing them sprout. Sometimes some of the seeds will actually be ready and sprouted enough for you to start eating them. But definitely by 4 or 5 days, if you're using small seeds like alfalfa, which almost everybody that sprouts alfalfa or broccoli.
Right.
Or both. Okay. Those things take anywhere from 4 to 5 days, and you'll have a jar full of sprouts.
Yep.
And they're ready. I mean, on salads, you can throw them into stir fries if you're sprouting things like mung beans or peas or corn or something like that. Okay. But if you're just using them on salads and sandwiches and things like that, they're ready right there out of the jar. People, that's the basic sprout growing procedure.
Right. And nutritionally, we've got a lot of value from those sprouts.
Yes, we do. And by the way, though, before we get on to the subject of nutrition, specifically, I want to talk about the other methods.
Okay.
Because you can grow them with jars, yes, but I don't care if you have a stainless steel dog bowl. You could grow them in that too.
Right.
So long as it's something that you can cover to keep bugs or anything like that out, and that you can, drain it without losing your seeds, and cover it up with water and keep it out of direct light. Those are the 3 keys. Cans. There are. If you ever go
I used to use a plate with paper towel.
Yeah, you could use a plate with paper towels. You can go to, for example, one of the very first sprouting kits that I ever bought was at a prepper expo that I went to in Las Vegas a few years back. And I'd been using jars and stuff for years, but this was kind of a cool little, there's 3 trays that stack on top of each other, and you could start 3 different kinds of seeds just in this one little small area instead of having jars spread out all over the place.
Right.
Okay, and works great. It costs $12 or something like that.
Yeah.
So cheap. It wasn't any big deal. But anybody can sprout, and I mean that seriously. Just like you were talking about, you can sprout if all you have is some damp paper towels.
Exactly.
Though you really want to do that with a larger seed, because otherwise they'll stick to the towels.
Yeah. The jar system is nice just because you can get that bulk amount of sprouts. Now, I'm not sure,
absolutely,
about taking those sprouts and planting them afterwards. I'm sure that you could. They're very delicate, But if
I've never tried that. I've never tried to plant sprouts. I've always just grown them to consume.
Exactly, and that's what I wanted to get at.
If I was going to do that, I would, instead of trying to sprout them before I take them out of a jar and try to transplant them, I think you'd have a ton of failure doing that.
Right? Yeah.
I just plant the seeds.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I wanted to make the point that this is for consumption. This is for, this is growing sprouts like you would buy at the store in the little plastic. Those are actually grown somehow, and how they're grown is using these methods. So the jar just gives you the most bang for your buck, basically. You can
And here's
grow a
something
lot of
that's
them
really
in
important, okay? You're going to, the first time you do this, you're going to end up with maybe a big old jar full of sprouts. And it's, unless you have a decent sized family, you're not going to eat that all in one setting.
Right.
All right. You need to be able to preserve them. And what you have to do is you need to drain all of the water out of them and let them sit where they can dry out a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. You keep them in the jar, obviously. You're not going to just spread them out all over your countertop. Or
Yeah, you don't want to dry
but,
out that one.
You keep them in the jar, but you let them dry out for a day or two.
Okay.
And then, you can stuff them in a plastic bag and shove them in your fridge, and they'll keep for a week easy.
Right.
And usually, I start a new crop about every 4 to 5 days, which kind of ensures I have a steady supply.
Okay.
But then also, when I buy sprout seeds anymore, I buy them by the pound.
Okay. So it's something that we should be prepping ahead of time to make sure we have plenty of sprout seeds.
Again, it's just like, and the seeds themselves, if you throw them in a freezer.
Oh, right.
Most all seeds that you sprout, other than onion, almost all seeds that you can sprout other than onion have a freezer shelf life on them of about 5 years.
Okay.
So you have plenty of time to use them and without losing too much in the way of viability. Okay. But seriously, I keep them in a fridge. If we were in a apocalyptic scenario where you're having to bug out or something like that, well, you know what? Too bad. You're just going to have to eat them up.
Yep. Yeah, and it's really
unless
great.
you have a cold spring, unless you have a cold spring or a creek or something like that, or even when I was a kid, we had a basket that got lowered down into the well, and milk and items like that were kept in that basket because the cold water of the well kept everything nice and chilled, and then you just hauled it back up when you wanted to use something. It was a little bit more, not as convenient as going to the refrigerator and opening the door.
I was just thinking about that, like because around here it's the river system, so if you had like a waterproof container or something, then you could put them inside, put them in the river, and keep them colder, for a longer term.
You just need like ideally a some sort of a basket or box, for example, that allows water to flow through it.
Right.
Now, I don't know what they're called, but I'm thinking of those plastic recycle containers that the sides and the bottoms look like a web of plastic. So there's holes all through it.
Mm-hmm.
And you weight those down in the river and water. In any event, people would have to figure out in a bad situation how they were going to preserve their harvest and keep it from spoiling until they could get around.
Yeah, and if all else fails, just eat the gosh darn things and get it over with, because it's that kind of thing. If you can produce them every 4 to 5 days, then you might as well just eat them and start with your next batch.
Yeah. You have like 2 different jars or 3 different jars in your backpack. Right. Or you spread it out amongst different members of the people that you're traveling with or something like that.
And the plastic like peanut butter jars might not be a bad idea if you were in a go situation, because it would be lighter. You wouldn't have to worry about the glass breaking.
It doesn't have, and you don't have to worry about breakage.
Yeah. But I never thought about that. I was just thinking, I always think glass. But no, that's a great idea. Just take a peanut butter jar and then pop the top on that.
The thing that you have to remember is you have to keep those jars upright, because you do still have to have holes in the top.
Right, the slosh factor.
No joke.
Right. I was thinking maybe you could have like a bag that you could put around your jar that, you could hang it on the outside of your bag.
You know what? If you had like a little burlap bag.
Right. That way the sun wouldn't
That'd be
hit it,
perfect.
but if you slopped it around, it wouldn't be on all of your stuff, and your undies wouldn't
Well,
be in
exactly.
there getting wet.
Throw the jar in the bag and hang it from your pack.
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
that's
it's
a
going to
good
like
idea.
bang and swing and really make things fun while you're hiking through the woods.
Yeah, but you just rope that thing down or whatever, but at least it's not spilling all over the inside. And food's kind of important when you're on the move like that. So that's why I wanted to bring the importance of this is a really viable option for food as you go. So if you were traveling through like a desert area, or you were traveling through, our wild foraging options can change so much as you change ecosystems that you might not know what's available to eat in that area, and it can be really dangerous.
Unless
to
you're
just
an
start
expert in that
experimenting.
regard. Exactly.
Right. So this would be a really viable option to keep yourself nourished as you're moving through, and then hopefully you have some seeds left when you're done with getting wherever you're going, so you could grow some of the plants and have more seeds.
Well, and then if you're like me, you're planning on just bugging in.
Right.
And if you're planning on bugging in, then you've got this constant supply of sprouts. Hey, I already mentioned sandwiches and salads, but like you can do slaws. Most of the larger sprouts are great in stir fries. So all I know is I'm hooked on them and I love them.
They're yummy.
and then we're getting onto that topic where they're yummy, but they're also really, really healthy.
Right. So let's go into some of the nutritional values of them.
Well, here's where sprouts have literally been grown and eaten for more than 5,000 years. There are several different types of seeds are even used medicinally. I'm not up to date on that. I just know that it has happened. But it's common knowledge that sprouts are nutritious, but there's been actually very little scientific research done on that specific subject. While what little has been done reveals that most sprouts contain protein, which is essential if you're going to keep moving.
Yeah, and unheard of in plant life once it's older, besides like staying metal. Yep.
Exactly. So they contain, almost all of them contain protein. This is probably especially true of, for example, bean sprouts. But you would, and at least that's what most people would think. They'd think peas and, wow, yeah, that makes sense. Everybody talks about beans being a source of protein.
Right.
Here's what they don't know. Alfalfa and clover, beans run about 20% protein for the sprouts. Alfalfa and clover run 35% or 30%.
Nice.
Protein.
And we need that protein.
You wouldn't think that's not something that, I only recently learned that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not something that would have ever occurred to me. But hey, good thing. I like those things, so that's even better. I get a little bit of protein from them. But they're also great sources of vitamins. Almost all sprouts have vitamins A, B, C, and E. Most of them contain calcium, magnesium. There are several amino acids that are necessary for human life. Most of them, or many actually, have chlorophyll, iron, zinc, phosphorus, potassium, niacin.
They're power packs.
Yeah. One thing I was talking about how alfalfa, which, by the way, is one of the best all-around sprouts you can have for nutrition. Okay. I mean, it's not just cow food. Alfalfa is a good source of vitamin K, which plays a key role in blood clotting.
Okay.
And it also has as much carotene as carrots. Huh. So, more protein than beans, as much carotene as carrots. I mean, geez.
Why are we not eating more of these things?
I know. And also, basically, you think about it, sprouting that's cheap food.
Oh, yes. Like you say, how many seeds can you get off of one broccoli plant? I mean, you order them, they're just a massive amount of seeds come to you.
You'll get enough seeds off of one broccoli plant to pretty much keep you in sprout seeds for the rest of the year. The reason I do 2 or 3 plants worth is because I give them to friends, and
you trade
then
them.
I have a plentiful seed supply for growing next year's crop.
Right. Makes total sense. Yep, I'm a big proponent of the sprouts. It's a really, like you say, nutritious, easy, fun. Like with the kids, you can.
Oh
They
yeah,
can watch the
yeah.
sprouts
Children
grow
love
and the
doing
jar
stuff like
fill
that.
up.
It's like a science experiment.
Exactly. And then, what I've found is that with both of my children, my youngest still, he has more of a sweet tooth than my oldest ever did. But the gardens and sprouting is such a fabulous introduction to eating vegetables that when they can go and pick it or they can see it growing in that jar and be able to eat it right out of there, they really, really, start. It's a turn on for the vegetables. So
They
even
develop an appreciation for it. Plus, the thing of it is let's face it, if you pick a carrot out of the garden or a tomato out of the garden,
yeah.
it tastes so much better than anything you can get in the store that the kids, instead of saying yuck, are saying gimme.
Yep, exactly. So that's one, it's a really big benefit, get our kids into eating the vegetables and things like that.
Well, sure.
Instead of just
I
McDonald's.
remember when I was a kid in Kansas, and my grandparents, who they were adults during the Depression, the Great Depression,
right,
of the late 20s and early 30s. Okay, they had a 2-acre garden. That's a lot of garden. And so, children like me, we'd be drafted to go out and help.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially at harvest time when it was too late for us to do much damage. And so I can still remember going down the pea patch rows, and you take a pod off of the plant and you open it up, and okay, one pod for me in my mouth, one pod in the jar,
right,
or in the basket.
So. That's exactly. I would just eat all the tomatoes if I could. Well, Ray, thank you very much for coming on the very first episode and sharing the sprouts information with us. Because, like I say, there's a few details in this season's book, and they might seem kind of minuscule, but on a long-term situation, they're really important. So that's why I pulled out some of these things that might seem like everyday business to myself because I'm a gardener. But there's a lot of people out there that don't know the value of these things. So I'm really excited to have brought this topic to their attention.
I appreciate being on the show. One thing that we forgot to mention I would like to squeeze in here at the very end is perhaps one of the greatest beauties of being able to sprout seeds is I don't care if you're a college student living in a dorm room, you can sprout seeds.
Right.
You don't need land. You don't need a house.
Right. You can sprout it in your apartment. Well, and that's why I wanted to bring the connection between how easy it is, and like you could even do this on a bug out situation. So you have your seeds. You can even do this while you're on the move. So this is a really important thing to be able to bolster your natural food supply if you had to move, or like you say, if you were in an apartment situation or a college dormitory. So.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's my pleasure. All right. Thank you, Ray, for being here. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. And I love picking your brain with all the good survival information that Ray's got going. So you should go ahead and head on over to his website at www.raymonddeanwhite.com. That's www.raymonddeanwhite.com. Ray's got some great things going on. His newsletter is always packed full of survival information, and his books are just totally thrilling and entertaining, so you should get over there and check that out as well. Now let's go ahead and get into review time. It's time for review time. Got an opinion? I'd love to hear it. Go ahead and give me your 2 cents on Day After Disaster or the Changing Earth podcast. Head on over to Amazon or iTunes to give me your 2 cents. So on iTunes, I don't have any more reviews right now, so you guys got to let me know how you liked season 1, how you liked the start of season 2, and let me know what's going on over there on iTunes. But in the meantime, I have a couple of reviews from Amazon. I'm only going to do 2 reviews at a time because I only have a few reviews on Without Land. It's a brand new book, like I said. So I only have a few reviews, so I'm going to kind of drag them out. So my first review is from Ken J, and he says, awesome book, awesome author, 5-star review. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it. The next review that I have is from Skip Buck, and it's a 5-star review. And he said, second book is even better than the first. Just when you think you know where the story is going, it takes a dramatic turn. Great book, great author. So Skip's giving us a little insight into the future. You know, things are going to get good. So stay tuned, as always, on the Changing Earth podcast to see what's happening with Erica and what she's going to do next. I can't wait to see you here next week, and we can keep going into the meat and potatoes of this story because I know you're going to love it. But until then, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sarah for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, and Battle for the South at www.author.sarahfhathaway.com. If you love Sarah's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.